better breaking up the roof line, that massive roof there.
With the dormer.
The
With the
dormer,
dormer,
I
yeah,
think, will
exactly.
actually do
Yeah.
that.
Yeah,
My,
I like the idea of the 6/1s too, just because I think that they're more consistent with what I want to see as we look at the building. I understand what you're saying, Liz, but
Okay.
for my own impression,
Yeah.
I'd like to see 6/1s.
Just in terms of pure aesthetics.
Yeah, yeah,
It looks like it has always been there, and frequently carriage houses were attached to older buildings by breezeways, open sheds. I mean, it's sort of in the nature of the old farmhouse where the barn was attached to the house with a shed or a garage or a wood shed or whatever.
Right.
And again, it was a new addition between the two, but it looks like, I mean, passing down the street and looking at it, it looks like it could have always been there.
right.
Because it's
Yeah.
not atypical.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And again, I guess that's a mixed,
Right.
Yeah.
and then again, we could give them the option of doing either, whichever you think would look the
Yeah,
best.
well, Jay and I batted around the 6 and the 1/1, and Jay went with the 1/1 because that was what was below it.
Yeah.
So that's how we arrived
Okay.
at this, but.
I think that the 1/1s follow the Secretary of Interior's standards,
Mhm.
which do say you shouldn't give a false sense of history with your new additions.
Okay.
They should be compatible, but you don't want them to look like
Mhm.
they've always been there necessarily. You want them to work and be sympathetic with what's historic, but,
Yeah,
so,
And actually, if you use a insulated glass with an exterior screen on it,
Mhm.
the darkness of the screen will help. If you look at some of the other windows
that's
that
true,
have
yeah.
that will
Mhm.
help that blend in
Uh-huh.
so that it's not
Mhm.
gonna be as conspicuous as it
Mhm.
would with just glass sitting there reflecting the morning sun,
Mm.
which hits that building,
Yeah.
morning and
Okay.
late morning.
right.
yeah. The 1/1s are probably a little cheaper too.
Probably.
Less expensive.
What are the windows? Are they Marvin's or what do you use?
Ooh, that's been a while since whatever we used on the last one, probably use again, yeah. We'll pick a good one.
Looks like a wood window.
I'm interested in the sort of rhythm between siding, window, double window, siding, window,
Mhm.
siding, that they're unequal, and whether that is what the intention behind that is.
It almost looks like he matched.
Oh, I see.
He matched the bump out on the second story of the main building. You know, you have a single on on either side and then that double in the front.
Well, also, just there's
There's more than that.
there's a lot more
Yeah,
siding
the
on the
same
far
s-
left
Oh,
hand.
okay.
And it looks like the space between the two windows is
Yeah.
unequal on the right and left also.
Oh, okay.
And
Yeah.
whether there is some intentionality that I don't understand.
It might have to do
I'm
with the
looking
floor
for the
plan,
Yeah,
I would think, yeah.
yeah, but
It may be that we were hitting here is the floor plan. There's
This is not, this is not great.
there's a wall here, and we were gonna move it here to make this
Yeah, you're right.
Right.
Because
a little
that's
more generous. This
smaller
office
than
looks
that
too
space
small.
there.
Right,
So-
this is over.
I'm
it's not
guessing
centered,
that
'cause you're
wall
this too.
It's over the
Right.
doors
Is
instead
there.
of under
Right.
the
I'm
cupola.
thinking that's
I
what he
think,
did.
I like the
Right.
Why he
balance
did
of it,
that.
I think it works fine.
yeah,
Yeah. This is the existing floor plan,
I'm certain there's good reasons for it.
and I
It looks
think
a
we
little
were,
awkward.
we wanted to move this wall, or cross out the existing wall. This wall here would be the new wall, and I'm guessing Jay married up the split in the window
Yes.
with that wall, yeah.
Can I have a copy of that just for file?
Yeah.
Awesome, thank you.
I'm certain Jay is sensitive to what it looks like from the exterior.
Right.
Multiple things, but since this is all I have to work with.
Yeah,
If there were a way to make that feel.
yeah.
Rhythmic or.
Well, maybe
symmetrical.
the window on the, like, you know, it's funny that far right-hand window, as you're looking at the building, is if you slid that over, that would make it more equal, because it's, yeah, I see what you're saying, rather than move the middle one, is move this one that way.
Right, or
Yeah.
if you move this one,
That way.
That
Yeah.
way.
That makes sense. I think the middle one was lined up on that wall, but I think the two outer ones, we can make those equidistant if
yeah,
you'd like to.
I feel like that would
Yeah,
give it a little, everything else is pretty well proportioned and sort of stepped on the building to have
Right.
those.
yeah.
Even if then it's not quite centered on like stairwell or something like that on the inside, to have it look symmetrical on the outside.
Gonna do that as an option, as long as it fits with the floor
Yeah,
plan?
as long as it fits in,
Okay.
yes,
We'll make the windows equidistant, yeah,
as much as possible based
Mhm.
on floor.
yeah.
It's a beautiful building, so,
Yeah.
Thanks.
and you worked hard to make it nice. Pay attention to the details.
Yes. A little more painting to do up there, and a little more roofing and painting, and then the dormer, and we'll be done. Yeah.
I assume it'll look, you've already redone this roof since this photograph.
Yes, yeah,
And so this dormer will have an asphalt shingled roof to match whatever.
to match, yeah.
What we do is just put it in as an option that you may position the dormer with distance spacing for aesthetic balance if it can be accomplished with a proposed interior floor plan.
We'll do our best, yeah.
Any other comments, questions, suggestions? And as an alternative, depending on what the other windows are, I'm sure there's a mix of wood. I'm not sure if these were clad or wood down below.
I think on the front they're wood. They may be clad on the back, but I'm pretty sure they're wood on the front.
Okay. And again, you just indicated that the windows will match whatever was put in the other replacements and/or the new section. I can go through the criteria unless anybody has anything else to add before that. Here's a set of criteria. You've been through this before. I'll just read quickly through that.
Yeah.
Evaluation criteria. Number 1, preservation or reconstruction of the appropriate historic style of the proposed projects in the historic district or involves an historic structure. This addition of the dormer is acceptable. Harmony of exterior design with other properties in the district, acceptable. Compatibility of proposed exterior materials with other properties in the district, acceptable. Compatibility of proposed landscaping, none proposed in this application. Prevention of the use of incompatible designs, buildings, color schemes, or exterior materials, acceptable. Location and appearance of all utilities, no change in any lighting or other utilities.
Not on the outside, no.
Recognition of and respect for view quarters and significant visitors, including gateway views of the city and state house, acceptable. All in favor of the application as proposed, raise your hand.
Great.
And you can just sign that one right above my name in the lower left there. You have a pen?
There should be one under there.
Okay, thank you.
Right,
Got it.
so
Thank
did
you.
we go to go 1/1 or 6/1?
It's your option.
What's our
I
option?
didn't write
Oh,
it
you
down,
didn't
I
write it
didn't
down?
write it, you have it
You have it as
listed
one.
as a 1/1.
1/1, okay.
Unless you want the option of doing a
No, I
6/1.
think we're good with the 1/1s, yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Again, I think the screens on the outside are
Mhm.
usually dark enough that they'll make it more subtle whichever
Mhm.
way you go.
Yeah, great. All right, thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
I'm gonna just run downstairs real quick and check and see if I've heard from
Okay.
them.
We'll talk amongst ourselves.
Did anybody else take a look at this color?
Whoa.
It maybe didn't photograph
color
quite
is
right.
there.
It's a
I'm
little bright.
hoping that the color's a little darker and a little more subtle, maybe a
Yeah.
little gray in it or something to
Right.
tone it down.
Yeah, it's pretty bold.
We already have a green one on East State Street that
Yeah.
takes your breath away.
Oh, that, yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
Where the,
yeah,
yeah,
that somehow didn't look
I just,
it was represented.
it'll probably fade over in a couple of years.
20 years. It's too bad because
It's a nice building.
there's a depth in certain colors that you try to achieve that makes a building look really rich and really,
Mhm.
really nice. And that one didn't quite make it.
No, no, not sure,
It's unfortunate.
yeah.
And I don't know, some people see that, some people don't. Some of the better designers
I
are
think people don't,
really good
yeah.
with colors.
People don't realize really what it's gonna look like often
I
until
think
they
it's
get it
pretty
up.
hard to go from paint swatch or chipped.
Yeah, you have
Mhm.
to do a big
Well, they painted
sample.
samples on
Did
the
they do
side of the
samples?
building and
Oh, they
why
did?
they had people
Right.
thinking that was the one.
Right.
I would have kept going myself. I wonder if she has an actual color swatch, the true color.
I hope so, cause I don't think I could vote for that one.
That one's really not an accurate federal blue.
Mhm.
Right,
Did they give you an actual color
Name?
chip other
No.
than that?
That and saying it's federal blue. You want an
Well,
actual
it's good
color?
that they're here. We'd like an actual color
Yeah.
chip,
Okay, perfect.
because that's a bit bright. I'm not sure if that's what they were truly attempting. And again, that's a sample color on an entirely different building.
Yeah, no, I know.
And then they have a white trim, I'm not sure. What's the siding on the building now? Is that a wood siding,
I don't
So-
think
Looks
so.
like aluminum
I
to
don't
me.
know.
or is that aluminum?
I think it's aluminum.
I'm looking at the corners,
Right.
Yeah.
and there's not a corner board on there.
Yeah.
But I also don't read the little aluminum caps in there either.
There's no like, like that or trim around the windows either.
I was also looking at the corners here,
Yeah,
and usually
yes,
if it's
exactly.
wood,
And the windows, look at
sometimes,
these,
yeah,
yeah.
sometimes they will do a miter cut,
Mhm.
but more often than not, they do
Yeah.
a corner board.
So what kind of siding, what color, confirm the color trim,
An
get an actual color
color
chip.
chip.
Where is this building?
140.
It's on the corner of Bailey and,
And
Just
Memorial
before you go over
Drive.
the bridge,
And state.
Oh,
and
okay.
State, yeah,
next to the gas station.
right
Next to
on the
Paris.
riverside.
Okay.
Yeah, it's kind of an odd view.
Has anybody had a chance to look at the minutes from February the 4th?
I did, and they looked good to me.
Anybody have anything else to add or change?
I was not present.
Okay,
I think it looks good.
no apology necessary. Do I hear a motion to approve the minutes?
I move, oh,
Okay, all in favor of approving the minutes, raise your hand. Minutes are approved by 4 votes. Any other business, other than the fact the next meeting's Monday, April Fool's Day?
Hey, I have a question, because I have obviously have too much time on my hands, and I was reading all of our regulations. Why has the one more time sign not been removed from that building? It's an abandoned sign.
Probably because I have a backlog of sign enforcement that I haven't gotten to.
You
I
still
just
have
didn't know.
Lowenstein's address? Is there
It
anybody,
would be-
is
well,
there
it would be
anybody
the owner.
left?
It'd be
Yes,
the owner
that's
of the building,
Lowenstein.
So,
It's
I'm sure
not
it's
a
in there.
It's not a Jacobs building? I thought it
Not
was.
yet.
No, not yet.
I mean, he wants to sell, Lowenstein wants to sell the building, but it needs a lot of work. It's uninsulated and much of it, there's single pane windows, I'm not sure if the heating system was ever replaced. It was, the heating system belongs in the Smithsonian. And he wanted, last I knew, they wanted 1.3, as is.
No, it
well,
just caught my eye.
So anyway, but you're right.
yeah, no, it needs to come down. There's other signs that have popped up around the city that haven't got permits that I need to follow up on, so. Just been busy.
Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
I moved to adjourn.
Second?
I'll second.
All in favor of adjournment, raise your hand. Meeting is adjourned.
Yeah.
That was quick.
Look at us go.
do.
Clean
She's been
hands,
missing from
good
my
food,
package.
clean hands.
Do whatever, clean your
Yeah.
hands.
It's my plate.
So.
Oh, here it is, it was sticking to the inside of the envelope. There it is.
He's in healthcare professions, so he really can't. So we'll see, yeah, we'll see.
So where in West Virginia did you,
But how are you doing?
I was all over
how's your
all over
household
the southern
weather
part of the
this
state.
winter?
I was working
It's
for
all right. We were
a coalition of
I can't quite remember.
nonprofits
I feel like we were maybe
and folks on
fall, like
coal
maybe
pollution,
big
coal
deal?
coal mining issues.
Big deal down there.
So,
Really
yeah,
big deal.
it was interesting.
Yeah, I bet it was.
Yeah.
I didn't stay in Pittsburgh too
Yeah.
long, because
but we've done all
this
right.
was like the
Been really fortunate.
70s, and it was still pretty damn dirty back in those
During
days.
school break week and then.
I had a good job too, but my health was I started getting, I started getting asthma
Fall,
Mhm.
yeah.
as soon as I moved away.
Yeah.
Like,
And then we had the current.
Yeah.
Contract for summer daycare.
I,
A couple weeks ago, write it down.
Sorry,
no,
Dad.
I have to.
I left
turn
right
in
after
my
a really
pre-K
big
forms.
water
Right.
contamination event.
Corn,
Took a toll on me.
eek.
Uh,
We registered
like
for kindergarten.
100,000 people were out of water for
So exciting.
2.5 weeks.
We had told them yet, they
Yeah.
wait like
Dan.
4 or 5 months before we.
Yeah. Sort of like a
Start talking
flint
about
in
it.
the
That's
head.
what.
Yeah, not as bad.
Not as bad as what a disaster that
Through
is.
the end of the year
Yeah.
already,
Oh.
just because.
That was, no, that's, I mean, that Flint happened like,
Scheduling summer
came to fruition
vacations,
right
so I
after.
can coordinate them with childcare and.
quite a while.
Yeah.
But yeah, I forgot about the pre-K forms. I mentioned this
Yeah.
weekend, but we had 2 birthday
doing,
parties,
Mike?
a dinner party, and then my husband came down for birthday. And I
No,
was
this
like,
chemical, like, a lot of people had like
that one just-
immediate reactions to
that-
it.
that-
Thus far, there's been no real long-term.
Very nice outfit.
Oh, thank you.
You never
Very
know.
nice outfit as well.
Nah, you never
you.
know.
Until
Well,
35 years.
Yes.
That's all.
Very opinionated. What?
What about you?
It's true.
I gotta get one of the people left out.
I'll get to it.
But it's tough there, you know.
Start caring about something.
There's been so much exposure from so many different things, you know, whether it's
Oh, so
Yeah, I know, I had to
Yeah.
know what's what, right?
one
Yeah.
more,
Yeah.
one more chemical.
There's chocolate right there.
Hence, the given
Is Tom not coming?
Exactly.
Where does this chocolate come from?
I don't like the taxes here, well.
Yeah,
There
yeah.
were
But
out
we
and
don't
I
have
just
to
left
deal
them out.
with having
I don't know where they
emphysema
came
at
from.
age 45.
Exactly. Yeah.
For what?
Pay my dues.
Chocolate?
Did Dan get a chocolate?
No.
Awesome. There were
That's
only
okay.
3.
You know what? I don't need it. No. No.
It was for Tom. I just brushed my teeth.
Give it to Tom. Poor Tom. He looks underfed.
Defend himself. Yeah, he still has, I guess,
30
minutes
seconds.
after 7, but.
I saw him. We got our packets at the same time, so.
Oh.
Did you guys get those snazzy vests?
Aren't they?
Yes, huh?
Well, after you left, you know,
Yeah,
we just
yeah.
said,
I knew that much.
let's pick up the game.
You didn't get the memo, Ryan?
Paraphernalia.
Hmm?
Sometimes I show up and I've got my pin on from work. I just have to take it off.
Well, there's candy, it's chocolate, and I was looking for mints. That's for whoever.
Do you need one of these guys?
Or do you want one of these?
Oh, you're, thank you. I
Like
have a
Star
choice.
Duchies, yeah.
So I'm gonna keep my coat on a little bit. It's cold in here. It is.
It's a
You
bit
can turn
cold.
up. You can turn up the heat if you want. It's down to. I think it's set for 62, and it was like 67.
Oh, boy, let's not leave it down there.
62 is not quite enough.
So it's not just me.
I wasn't gonna adjust it because I've got multiple layers on. I didn't know. I was
Yeah,
like,
look,
people,
Yeah,
whatever
she's,
other people want.
Send it to the night.
It was a great discovery a couple weeks ago when I realized that you could
That you
actually
could adjust it.
adjust it.
And she's 2 months old.
10 weeks.
That's cool.
Yeah, so. It's doing great.
Okay.
He's very good.
Yeah. Yeah,
Hey, Tom. We were just waiting for you.
Some chocolate here for you.
Oh, thank you.
Don't let the late people get chocolate. Reverse incentive. Reverse incentive. I am.
Reverse, but okay.
Well,
Reverse
with
and
that, we
reverse.
need to get going. Are we ready? Great. Good evening, everyone. We're going to call this meeting of the City of Montpelier Development Review Board to order for Monday, March 18th, 2019. My name is Daniel Richardson. I serve as chair. The other members from my right are
Rob Goodwin.
Kevin O'Connell?
Deb Markowitz.
Meredith Crandall, staff. Kate McCarthy.
Ryan Kane.
Tom Kester.
So first order of business is approval of the agenda. Does anybody have any amendments to the agenda, or does someone wish to move for the agenda as printed?
So moved.
Motion by Kevin. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Kate. All those in favor of the agenda as printed, please raise your right hand. We have an agenda. No comments from the chair this evening. We'll move straight to the approval of the minutes. We have two sets of minutes. The first one are from February 19th. Myself, Kevin, Kate, Ryan, and Rob are all eligible to vote. Does anyone wish to amend the minutes or to move their approval?
I'll move approval of the minutes as drafted
For February 19th,
for February 19th.
motion by Ryan. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Kevin. All those eligible to vote, which would be myself, Kevin, Kate, Ryan, and Rob, in favor of the motion, please raise your right hand. They are approved. Excellent. Moving through very quickly. The second set of minutes are from March 4th. Myself, Deb, Tom, Ryan, and Rob are all eligible to vote for the March 4th minutes from our last meeting. Do I have a motion to approve or amend?
Move to approve as written.
Okay, motion by Deb. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Rob. All those in favor who are eligible to vote, please raise your right hand. We have minutes for March 4th as well. Great. Thank you all very much. That brings us to our first item of business for the evening, which is 19 Pearl Street. This is a final subdivision plan review. Mr. Noara?
Thank you.
So if you'll just state your name for the record, and then I will put you in under oath.
My name is Samuel Nuara.
Okay, and you're here as the applicant, is that correct?
Please.
Okay, raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the evidence you're about to give for the matter under consideration shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth under pains and penalties of perjury?
I do.
Very good. Do you, actually, let's have Meredith, you want to start us off?
Yeah.
Just give us maybe a refresher. I think we all remember discussing it, but it might be helpful to just refresh the application as well as any significant changes you as staff would like to direct our attention to.
Yep. So this is a fairly basic two-lot subdivision infill on Pearl Street. This is the final application. And during sketch plan, the major questions that we asked the applicant to come back about were underground utilities and landscaping for screening in between the new parcel and both the parcel is being subdivided off from as well as the closest neighbor. So that, there's a couple of issues like that, around that brought up in the staff report. The other update that you should be aware of is that a survey was completed. The original parcel was actually much larger than when we originally looked at it. And then the only really complication from that was that the front property boundary wasn't quite as close to the sidewalk as we originally thought. So the front porch is actually in that front setback, but I've flagged it in here, but it is my understanding of a previously existing nonconformity, so it should be fine. It is flagged in there in red, though, just as a highlight, because it's something different.
Well, and let me ask this question, Meredith, just so I understand, if we grant the subdivision, it doesn't alter the existing non-conforming.
Correct.
Nor would it open the door for what's labeled as Lot 1 to have a similar non-conforming. They'd have to
Exactly.
follow the front setbacks.
Exactly. There's the subdivision isn't gonna increase any nonconformity, or like you said, open any door for lot one to do the same.
Great. Mr. Narar, is there anything you wish to add?
I think I did my best to answer. I mean, the major bone of contention is obviously the power, the utilities.
Right.
Because I looked into that quite extensively, and it's for many reasons. First of all, that pole is 44 years old. They don't dig anything that's 30 years old or older. So that would be replaced. That side of the street, which is what, the south side? North side. So the entire neighborhood, the poles are on the north side of the street. Because I know it was presented as an option to possibly put a pole, run it overhead, over the street, and then underground it from there. Which I guess is technically possible, but I'm not sure what that accomplishes as far as, at that point, 60 or 70% of the line is then already overhead. It creates an anomaly where that's the only pole on the south side of the street in the neighborhood. I had Green Mountain Power come do, shortly after the other meeting, I had them come out and do a site visit to kind of run through all the options. One of them was directional boring technology, which isn't an option in this case because they indicated that it has to be 4 feet underground and encased in 4 inches of concrete, which they can't accomplish there's no way to accomplish that without digging up the sidewalks in the street.
Right. Well, does it, and has Public Works weighed in on that option at all? Because it seems
It's
to me we're
just-
going through the
Yeah.
sewer system as
Yeah,
well.
putting it under the street just isn't feasible.
Is it feasible?
And as Sam says, if then you're running the power for a few feet underground on the new parcel.
Right.
I even asked them actually if there's some, because I know in some older neighborhoods, there's like attached to other houses and run. I asked if there's any way I could, because I own the house now. Is
Yeah.
there any way I can, and they don't do that anymore. I don't know when that went out of fashion or law or whatever, but she said that attaches you permanently to the existing, it's not something they do anymore.
So what did Green Mountain Power recommend as far as attaching power to the house? Just running it from
Standard, yeah.
across the street?
There's that large tree in the corner there, and the way the pole is situated, I forget what the technical term is, but you have to run it along the line for, 15 or 20 feet and then across. But she said, we're not even close to the span that, they can go 200-something feet, We're like less than half of what, to meet those requirements, just to run it down the line and then across. She said they could hook it up in 2 days for less than $1,000.
Or dig up the entire street?
Yeah.
Or,
Inside
yeah,
of
I
it,
actually
or-
had an excavator, I mean, I tried to do my best, to present, because it just, not only they can't use that pole, so you'd have to order a new pole, which is $3,500 and a 3-month wait time because of the age of the pole. You would have to dig up both sidewalks of the street, and between the pole and the excavator, it's at almost $30,000 minimum, barring any water or sewer and then, Green Mountain, both of them actually indicated to me that obviously the street's never gonna be the same.
Right.
I'm not sure when they were, when that street was redone or whatever, but it just, from their opinions were thoroughly against it.
Okay. And just we're sort of backing our way into, I think what you're asking for is essentially a variance from that requirement.
Yeah, I wasn't sure of all the legal whatever. I don't know if you have some exemptions, I know a variance is ultimately possible. I don't know what's I don't know what your options are as far as that is
Well,
concerned.
it's really, I don't think we have to do an official variance or waiver.
Okay.
The language in the clause says that all utilities shall be located underground unless prevented by ledge or other physical conditions.
Okay.
So I think it's the board basically having to make a determination that this is one of those other physical conditions. It's also a
Right.
discussion point on whether or not the board wants the planning department to try and come up with some clarifications for these subdivision provisions that don't really make sense for one lot infill
For the future.
subdivisions for future.
Yeah.
If this is one of those troublesome
Or
ones
we
that just
can set-
doesn't make sense.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Or we could set the precedent by taking that,
Right.
that language and using it. We begin to build up a case history.
Yep, there's that. It's also, but also just when new zoning administrators come in, not that I'm anticipating that anytime in the future, but having something that, if you wanted to, put in the regulations where there's a little, I don't know if, you know, whether or not they keep coming back here or not.
Well, so,
It's just a question to think about.
go ahead, Kate.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen some sketch plan review for these one-lot infill subdivisions so far, but haven't seen many of them through yet. And so I would prefer to see more examples of who is looking for how this applies before we make any requests to the
Oh,
planning commission.
Yep, no,
But
and
it
this was
sounds like it
just
could
a
be like
thought.
flagged in pencil.
Yeah,
I
just
just,
for now.
I think it's worth flagging, whether we make it a formal recommendation to planning commission or not. I think you're right, Kate, that, you know, this is one out of, you know, one of the first, whether this is going to be a repeat issue. It sounds like, and I agree with Kevin as well, that, you know, there's a way of fixing this based on the language, and I think this fits within the physical conditions. I mean, I think this would even qualify for a larger variance, you know, just given the testimony we've received, and that I would elicit some additional, but I can't imagine at the same time two things. One, that this is an isolated incident. There are many streets in Montpelier existing where power lines are strung on one side of the street, and if there's infill on another, how that power would be run to those new lots in those infill projects. I suspect this is a problem that is likely to repeat. It doesn't seem to be that unique of a set of circumstances. And the second thing is, I'm not quite clear why the bylaws have that in cases of infill. I can see with new construction, that generally tends to be the new standard, is running power lines underground. And so it might be helpful eventually, I mean, difference between maybe raising it formally or penciling it, if the planning commission did have new construction in mind, new subdivision, sort of new development, as opposed to infill, and whether that should be distinguished down the line. Okay,
When if we do carry that forward, I would want us to have a discussion about how we define infill. I don't remember if it's in the definitions, but we've been using it very loosely, including for big 2-acre lots up in the Town Hill Road area as infill. And I think we're talking about something very specific here, which is an existing neighborhood. So
Right.
that's my little note for the
Yeah.
future. Thank you for bearing with us through that thought process.
I just wanted to, I think moving forward, thank the applicant for the due diligence and the
Yes.
information provided. I think that is helpful for going forward when we cross it, the information that we may need to come to an appropriate decision. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks for taking the time to do that.
I wanted it to happen, so.
no, I think that does helpful. And just to be clear, the power lines run along the north side of Pearl Street. Do all the houses along the south side have their power lines running across Pearl Street above? Okay, so, I mean, this is one amongst many houses that will have its power lines strung across Pearl Street, in other words.
Many, all of them there's no poles on that side. I mean, you could underground, if it was on the other side, I actually thought about it because the gentleman that has the house on the corner has quite a big lot that I can imagine, there's only so many lots around. And I can imagine from that same pole I'm talking about, somebody someday might wanna, but it's right there and they can just underground from right there. This is if you're on the other side, there's really no way to do it without, destroying the streets and the sidewalk.
Okay. Is there anyone here to be heard on this application? Just checking. All right. Very good. So, I think that is certainly the major issue, and it seems like we have some consensus here, unless anyone had any other questions that they wish to ask about this. So, what, I know one of the concerns that we had was about landscaping. What is the proposal?
Well, at this time, I don't, there's not much I can say with much specificity because we have to, I mean, ultimately, obviously, it's to build. And
Mhm.
we're gonna want some kind of, but everything is going in steps, so it's like, you know, we have the architect, you have the builders, you have these meetings, you can only go forward so fast with so many things. And actually, just for the first time, because now we're getting to the end of the drawings and, you know, the actual dimensions and this and that, and I staked it out with just some garden stakes, so I could just get an idea, okay, this is what they're proposed, here's the setbacks, here's the, so I'm not sure how I can specifically landscape it now anyway, because we were talking about window placements, whether it's, you know, moving the entire thing forward or back 5 feet even would, you know, not that you could do much at this point in the year anyway, but even if you could, you may just change your mind 6 months from now when it's actually getting finished anyway. I'm not sure how much I can speak to the specifics. The
Sure.
only issues that, obviously that big tree up there is not getting touched, all throughout the back of the property. There's one tree in the middle, like directly in the middle of the new lot that will have to get removed because it would be in the living room, but, other than that, the entire backside of our property now and the neighboring properties, it's obviously not on the survey, but the Regina that's right here, the back of her property, and then backing up to, the Libby's property is all trees and bushes and, I mean, when it's grown in the summer, you can't even see the houses up on the top of the hill, or, the only one really is gonna be the 2 existing directly on the other side.
Right.
They're gonna be mainly affected, and we'll have to see, at that point,
Well,
you know, what. But I guess that mostly depends on the placement of the house and windows and so on, doors, and
I'm looking for.
I'm not sure I can address that with that much specificity at the moment.
Well, it does talk about, and let me just go to our,
So page 11 in your staff report outlines.
yeah, I'm just, of course, it doesn't, I'm looking for the actual site.
Oh, for when we get to site plan?
No, just within the development standards of the subdivision standards, the 3.5, I think it's, is it- yeah. So, one of what we're required to look at, and, is for landscaping, and I think it's 3.5, 3.6, is it
F.
F?
Yep, page 3-92.
There we go, that's why. Yeah, it talks about landscaping. It says the applicant shall design the subdivision to maximize the preservation of existing mature vegetation and provide additional landscaping which may be installed when the lots are subsequently developed as necessary to, 1, maintain and provide privacy for both adjoining property owners and between lots within the subdivision. 2, to enhance the appearance of street frontage and shade trees and sidewalks. 3, to maintain or establish vegetated buffers along waterways and other natural areas. And 4, to utilize green stormwater infrastructure practices. So I would suggest that 3 is not an issue here because you're not along a waterway. But 1, 2, and 4 are. And so I understand, you know, what you've essentially created is another sort of deeper than wide lot that's consistent with the other lots. But, you know, as you've already said, you're looking at where there would have to be some buffer between the new house and your existing house, because those are gonna be fairly close together, as well as between the new house and the house right next to it, because that's also gonna need a little bit of a buffer. And you're saying that the trees as exist, the big tree in front, and the trees in the back aren't gonna change. There might be one tree in the middle
There's
of the
one
lot
tree in the middle,
that's gonna have to come out because that's where
It's
the
right
house
in
is
the
gonna
middle,
go. So I don't, I think what we're looking at is whether this design, and I'll ask the other board members if they, what their feelings are, is whether we need to have a greater design for the landscaping. I mean, it's obvious, based on the testimony, where some of this landscaping is going to have to go when the house is built and developed. Is that enough for us at this stage? And then when the house is built, I mean, part of it is, of course, you're not gonna be able to control, are you selling this lot? Or are you building on it?
The one we're gonna build on?
Yeah, you're
No,
gonna,
we're gonna live there
okay,
and sell the existing house.
oh, okay. Go ahead.
Leaving aside the current plans for the lot, what we could do to ensure that the subdivided land is developed properly is, I think we've received evidence that that preservation of existing mature vegetation is being maximized with the 2 trees that you're able to keep. There could be put on the subdivision permit a condition that says, additional landscaping will be provided as necessary to do items 1, 3, and 4, pending the design of the final.
Yeah, I guess that's just
building.
what I'm confused is when is it at this stage or is it at the
It would be the next
building
stage.
stage?
It would be at the
Yeah.
next stage. The
Right.
bylaws required anyway,
Yeah.
to come back to landscaping. So I think,
Right.
what Kate is suggesting is a way to accommodate your reasonable need to put it off.
And it
Until
also ensures that the subdivision itself has all the pieces and parts it needs if for some reason you choose not to develop the lot and sell it to someone else.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah,
So the
No, I
specific
get
dots on the
why-
map will be with the house permit.
okay.
Yeah.
Yep. No, I totally understand, and I mean, I have to, barring some whatever where we end up not living there, if it goes forward like we plan, obviously I have
want
to
to be
live there
nice
with
too.
these people too,
Yeah,
it's not
yeah.
like,
Right.
it's in my, from a selfish perspective, it's in my best interest to have it, but I'm not sure how much of that I can address at this moment.
Yeah.
No, and I
So
don't
we'll
think it's,
save it.
I don't think it's reasonable to require you to have a fully fledged landscaping plan at this stage, because you don't have your house plans yet, and it's not required by a subdivision. And I think 90% of what you need to do, you've done, which is to show, you've created a design that seems to be consistent with the existing landscaping. And it's really just this next 10%, which is to sort of commit to what logically should follow, which is that there will have to be additional landscaping consistent with both our landscaping standards and as we've identified, where you're going to need those buffers between the houses.
Yeah. So maybe I could clarify that when I'm suggesting putting a condition on the subdivision permit, I don't mean that condition would need to be fulfilled before you get the permit. It
Right.
would mean that the condition would need to be fulfilled in order to maintain adherence to the permit
Right.
once you build.
Right.
If I was unclear about
Well,
that, I just
no,
wanted to
it makes
clarify
sense
that.
too, because I'm actually just thinking forward now. At best case scenario, if we can get this through this year, it's not gonna get built and finished until the end of the year, and you're not gonna be able to landscape anything in December anyway. So I guess a lot of that will have to come the following spring or.
As long as there's a design for it, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, that's the part of the,
As long as
part of the
there's a
zoning permit would be to have a landscaping plan in there, but you
Right.
wouldn't have to
Implement.
implement that landscaping plan
Gotcha.
until the expiration of the zoning permit. So you basically have 2 years.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Actually, just as a quick question, maybe what is it, like, let's say, in this case, if I wanted to put a tree the opposite of what this one is now, on the big one that's marked on
On the corner?
at the end of the new lot, next to Regina's property. there.
Mm-hmm.
If you put one on the other side, just so I know in my head, I guess I would need to look up your landscaping regulations, but, because something like that, I would need to think about now with the driveway and the, you know,
So,
but I
we'll-
could definitely put a tree there.
come see me after March 27th, and we'll see what the city council passed for revamped landscaping
Oh,
regulations.
there's,
So give me a little time.
Well, I'll be the first with those.
It is
too.
great, you don't wanna be under the
Yeah.
current
It's
landscape.
designed
Really?
to solve the
It's like
problems
per,
of the
yeah,
Okay,
per square
good.
foot, you'd have to have like probably 30 shrubs and 5 trees or something.
Yeah, so,
Well, I have
Get you made
100 trees on my
Wait.
property as it is.
wait and get in touch with me, and
Perfect.
once the new landscaping regs are adopted,
take the
we'll
new
we'll
ones.
reevaluate.
Sounds good, thank you.
Okay, so that provides flexibility on landscaping.
Yep.
Great.
No, I think that makes sense.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right. So, and we've talked about the front porch, that our understanding is it's a pre-existing non-conforming. We're not changing that or altering it, and nothing in the pre-existing non-conforming porch is going to affect on what will now be lot 2 will affect how lot 1 is developed. Were there any other issues that people wish to discuss on this particular subdivision? Otherwise,
And I have one question.
oh yes,
So this little narrow tiny area on the south side of the, we give an explanation on
I'm
what's
working
there?
on it.
Oh, so, okay,
That belongs to the family behind there.
okay.
They just don't know that. So this drawing, where the back of that, so there's that little chunk, right, that's missing, that's marked. So between the back property line and, let's say, that tree, about halfway through there is where the slope starts.
Mhm.
That slope goes up about equally as far on the other side, so it's maybe, that slope is, I don't know, maybe 20 feet, let's say, and it slopes up 10 or 15 feet. The surveyor, so apparently where my garage is now was a barn, it was all one property, and she thinks there was some drive up from, because that's a higher, and when they broke it off, there was something at the time that made this little piece of property go with the way it was divided, which she can't tell now, obviously. It was either an error or there was something at the time that it was necessary for them to keep that little piece. So I went and talked to them, but I talked to their kids, actually, they weren't home at the time, but I'm waiting, because I want them to, you know, the surveyor, that was the first thing, she said, see if you can get this cleaned up, so when we record it, it's, because they don't even know they own it, it's,
Sure.
it's separated by 20 some odd feet of full-grown trees, you know, but it's officially belongs to them.
Yeah, I just didn't know if there was any structure or anything there that.
No,
you know,
it was a
so-
really weird,
Yeah,
she
okay.
knocked on the door, was like, hey, you gotta look at this. But for some reason, you don't own this little, it's like, you know, 3 by 10 feet stretch behind the tree. And then it's all hill up to there, and then they have fence on the back of their property, so they don't even know they own it.
an anomaly of some
Yeah.
sort.
And she wasn't 100% sure why, because it goes back, I mean, that plan goes back to 1901 that she was referencing, so it was a little unclear what that was there for.
Well, this is in the meadow, so that is a,
Slow neighborhood.
yeah, I mean, but it's also relatively, I mean, compared to some neighborhoods, it was relatively recently developed.
It was
For my
more
Montpelier
comprehensively
standards.
planned, I would say.
What?
I'd say it was more uniformly planned.
Yes.
Well, and
That
the
is true.
reason she said, because when she took the dimensions of the old barn were listed, and they
Mhm.
go like up to their property, so, and it's a slope, so it was obvious that only maybe that third floor met that part of their property, and then the first and second floor were on our lot at the time, I don't know, she
Right.
didn't know why, but she has to point it out, cause that's her job.
Okay.
But I'm trying to get that cleared up before it gets recorded, but I don't think there's any issue.
Yeah,
if
no.
it's not, right?
Not any zoning issue, unless they come for an application to use it.
I should have them start mowing it.
Yeah.
Be a nice new neighbor.
Yeah, go talk to Steve Twombly after this, you know.
No, I'm sure it'll be fine. It's more of
Any
a
other
technicality
questions?
than anything.
If not, anyone have a motion that they wish to make?
Mr. Chair, I'll move final subdivision plan approval for 19 Pearl Street with the condition that, within 180 days of the decision, the applicant shall record the final survey plat in the Montpelier Land Records Office per the procedures detailed in section 4405 of the zoning regulations. And as previously discussed by the board, a condition that upon application for a zoning permit to construct a structure on this property, additional landscaping will be delineated as necessary to meet the requirements of section 3506F of the zoning bylaw.
Okay, motion by Kate. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Second by Rob. Any further discussion? Let me just, I don't think it needs to be part of the motion, but it's our understanding that part of this permit is going to be granting the, whether we call it variance or waiver, or finding that the power lines can be strung across overhead Pearl Street to get power to this lot 1.
Yes.
That's the understanding.
Thank
Okay.
you.
All those in favor, please raise your right hand. You have your subdivision
Thank you.
permit.
Thank
It
you.
will
Thank
issue, there'll be a written decision that will be issued in a few days or maybe a week.
It'll be a little bit, I've gotta catch up on a couple of other ones, but yes, I get it.
I got plenty.
I'll memorialize all of this, I don't get the permit.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't want to overpromise.
Nope, that's okay, nope, thank you, nope, Kate's got one, and then I've got another one in process, and one more to go, and then I can do this one.
Okay, so the next item of business is a couple of things. One is that 213 Main Street, which was scheduled for a final plan review of a 2-lot subdivision, that's been tabled by the applicant
Yes,
until, do they wish to have it tabled?
yes,
Okay,
yeah,
so we need a motion.
they had a conflict,
Okay, so they wish to have it tabled until April 1st, 2019?
yes.
So I will, unless anybody has any questions, entertain a motion.
So moved.
Motion by Kevin, do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Tom to table the final subplan for 213 Main Street to April 1st. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please raise your right hand. It's been tabled. All right, and the next item of business is 0 Main Street, directly after 1701 Main Street, and this is an informal review of 4 new dwelling units, and you must be Jeff Stetter?
Yes.
Okay. So, given that this is an informal review, we're not gonna put you under oath. I presume you're just looking for our initial feedback response.
Absolutely, yep, exactly.
So, Jeff, I'll open up the floor to you and
Okay, I'll give you a
give us a brief description, and then we'll just all chime in as we have questions.
Okay, great. Yeah, so, little background, I am a licensed architect, I've been practicing for 25 years. I was with Costas Bachman for 23 of those, and moved on from there. But this is something I've always wanted to do, always wanted to do my own thing, right? I designed a lot of that stuff for other people. So I've been watching for pieces of property, and this one became available, and I do have a purchase and sale agreement on it with sort of 90-day vetting period where I can make sure I can do it, because it's not an easy piece of property to develop. So I'll just kind of go through these 4 pages I've got here. Obviously, that's the piece of property there. It's slopes. It's a steeper sloped site, and if you go to the photos, when you're at the street level, you can't quite tell, but there is actually a level area somewhat at the top that if you look at photo C, that you can kind of see that somewhat level area there. So I'm looking to do 4 units. I would live in one, and 3 very small 1-bedroom homes would be the other 3 units. like a total square footage, we're talking with like 3,000 square feet, so it's not a big, you know, for four homes, it's pretty small, compact development. Be in one building, I'm looking to be highly energy efficient, net zero ready, probably won't be able to do solar panels right off, but hopefully down the road and set it up so that I can add them to the roof. Trying to do as minimal site disturbance as possible. I kind of like the natural aspect of it, the woods. So besides the clearing that would be required for the home, the drive, and septic system, because septic system and water system would be on site in this site. Talked with Tom McCardle and he said I guess the connections are down past the entrance to Murray Road.
The Murray Hill.
Yeah, Murray Hill
Okay.
development there. So it's sort of out of reach to get to that. So let's see. So then, if you go to page 3, this was based on a map that Audra gave me. That the red indicates slopes over 30% and over, which
Did you guys not get?
We didn't get color.
Black and white.
Some of you.
yeah, some of them got color. Yeah,
Okay. Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Did you make the copies?
I
or
made
we?
copies. Yeah.
Oh,
I was
okay.
cheap. Sorry.
That's all right. See?
Okay,
Yeah, I'm not sure with the black and white.
you can share it down there.
That's big. Oh, well, it makes a big difference.
Yeah,
Here we go.
So yeah,
So the red is 30%?
yeah, the red, and then the sort of bluish gray. That's the area of the red on the piece of property. So that's my area calculation. So if you look at
Oh, I see.
if you look at the gray areas on the piece of property, that's the areas that are over 30%. Given this particular large scope topography plan, it's not a high resolution plan. It's given it 10,000 feet or something. I don't know. So the yellow areas are areas that are less than 500 square feet, which you can deduct from the calculations. This is all coming down to a density calculation. I assume you guys probably are
Yep.
thinking that. So once you do this calculation of total area and so forth, I really only, as it currently stands, I currently only have enough density for 3 units. I need, I have 28,000. The area that is less than 30% slope is 28,000 square feet. I need 9,000 square feet per unit, so I can get 3 units in there. I really want to get 4, and I need to understand the new zoning changes. I know there's some happening immediately, but there's some also that are happening.
Well, there's no guarantee.
Right.
There's
Right. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, there's no
no,
guarantee that the buildable area
He's gonna change.
calculation is gonna change.
Right. What's the time frame on that? I mean, just roughly. I know.
Planning Commission
If
is
you say
working.
June, I'll expect October. So,
That sounds about right.
yeah. Is that?
It really, the Planning Commission is still working through those, and changes to the buildable area would be part of that whole package.
Okay.
So it has to finish getting through Planning Commission and then go before City Council. So, the hope is in front of City Council June.
So Meredith,
But-
that's become separated from, so the landscaping piece is moving along, going to city council at the end of this month, and the buildable area pieces are separate. And they're
Right,
on
so
a slower
right,
timeline.
so landscaping and slopes are whatever for City Council for, it could be voted on and decided as of the 27th next week. Buildable area calculation, which has to do with slopes, has been separated from the larger slopes provision changes because the Planning Commission could not reach consensus.
Okay.
So,
So those are two
no, they
things that
couldn't
would.
reach
Yeah.
yeah, sorry,
Right.
unanimity.
They could
Yeah.
reach consensus.
Right,
but
sorry.
They
They
couldn't
couldn't-
reach unanimity.
Yes,
Yeah.
sorry,
And
wrong word.
This may
Very
be,
important word.
this may be something that's worthwhile. We can give you our feedback, but we're constrained by the existing rules.
Right. I understand.
Some of this that you're talking about, I think, is good to put before the Planning Commission, because as you heard from the previous discussion, they've made a lot of changes, and a lot of times they have a certain set of facts in their mind driving their policies and making them aware of other circumstances or other situations may allow them to start to, I believe, enlarge their scope of thinking about these type of parcels, letting them know this type of parcel exists, your needs are X, and it makes sense to allow for this kind of development for all the reasons you're starting to articulate to us, because they're the ones who can actually start to change some of the policies and rules that we then have to enforce.
So you'd recommend going before the planning commission then? Is that, okay.
I think it's good to make them aware.
They need to see case examples of how this is really impacting
Okay.
Yeah, I mean,
what's going on in the city.
they have the unenviable position of trying to think of this in the abstract, and the more concrete you can make it for them, I think the better.
Okay.
So, is this in the Murray Hill neighborhood of,
Backside, yeah.
is
Yeah.
that is that technically the part of the zoning it falls in, is that neighborhood?
It's residential 9,000.
Yeah, and then within that, we've got a whole bunch of neighborhoods.
what
you
is-
might-
I
Oh,
honestly,
the
I
neighborhood,
didn't write
yes.
that down.
Okay.
What
I
is
don't know.
Murray Hill density?
It's the same.
It's the same,
It's 9,000.
yeah, but
I did take a peek at it, and I'm pretty sure it's considered, so within the zoning, we've got the zoning districts, and then we have
Yeah.
neighborhoods within it. Each one has a slightly different character, so
Right.
particularly for a conditional use, which this would be, I think a part of our task is to evaluate the proposal with respect to any impacts it does or doesn't have on the character.
Is this kind of the small paragraph description?
Yep,
Kind of,
that's the one.
just kind of the general feeling of that area? That's-
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so, maybe someone else can corroborate, but I think this parcel does fall technically within, Murray Hill 11-5, so I guess what we'd look at is this is, the
Yeah.
description of the neighborhood is, this is one of the city's more recent residential developments with single-family homes and townhouses accessed by several cul-de-sac streets and a substantial amount of open space. Proposed land development may feature infill residential development where infrastructure is available and to the extent feasible, given the availability and ownership of land in this neighborhood. So when I read that, I noted that infrastructure is not available on this site, and I don't know that this would be considered infill in the way that is envisioned by the description.
And what was the last sentence that?
The last sentence.
Other than, is it
Let me see.
some land ownership or
Extent
something?
feasible given
Oh, yeah.
the
To the
availability.
extent feasible, given the availability and ownership of land in this neighborhood, which suggests to me that this was written with the Murray Hill subdivision
Yeah.
in mind, and not as much with the adjacent parcels that are not part of it in mind.
Right.
And so this is another thing to mention to the planning commission, because they're the ones who envision where the various districts are.
Right. Good, great.
You know how long this has been like a separate parcel?
Actually, let's see, this survey was done, 1970, so I'm assuming
So it
1970.
predates the Murray Hill subdivision at least.
Yeah, yeah, and the owners are Calvin Murray and Elsie Murray.
That's interesting.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I'm trying to picture where it is.
It's
It's-
actually, if you're going up Main Street and you
Yep.
pass the.
Murray Hill's on the left.
Entrance there.
Yep.
And there's the big field there,
Yep.
right? And then there's a line, right when it comes, you see it actually, there's a line of trees, right
Yep,
at the property line, pretty much. And it's right there.
it's on the other side of it.
And then if any of you, when you're driving up there on the left, there's like these old foundations and stuff on
Mhm.
the hill. I don't know if anybody remembers those
Mhm.
things. They're up on the left. I think it's like remnants of an old garage maybe or something. That's not on this property, actually. But that's kind of the end of it.
Oh, that's
So it's 1.17 acres.
And it's all wooded right now.
Yeah, yeah, for the most
Yeah.
part. I'm wondering if it was pasture at one point or something, because all the trees are like
Mhm.
this.
The same, yeah.
And they're not like, some piece of property you see them where the trees are falling down and stuff, and so the soil's eroding, but they're all like straight. They're all, it's like new, 30, 40-year-old growth, it seems like.
you could look at is, whether there are any natural resources that appear on this parcel, that are part of the natural resources map of the city? No?
I don't think there is.
There are no resources, there's no
Look
map.
at a lot of maps. You
Okay.
can see,
All right.
hit that layer,
Oh,
nothing
so you
shows up.
played with that, yep,
Yeah.
yep, that's a good research resource.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, the Vermont Geographical Information.
Vermont Center for Geographical
Yes, that,
Information.
oh my
yeah.
gosh, what a great resource, it's amazing.
It's a lot of fun.
So, yeah, I mean, so you get to the end of it, the last sheet is sort of the basic site plan. You know, again, the intent would be to keep as much of the woods as possible. I'm thinking, I'm working with Don Marsh, civil engineer on site planning, and we'll be getting a more accurate survey. But in reality, though, this actually seems somewhat close. So the drive, it's a steeper drive, getting up to, trying to get to that point about 10 feet below that level area, that photo B or C, whatever it is there. And that would be sort of the first floor. It'd be sort of a walkout kind of relationship with parking underneath at that first level, and the foundation of the building would serve as a retaining to hold that slope up. Because part of that, with such a steeper slope, part of just getting the cars turned around and be able to go back out is a major site restriction. But you know, it amazingly it did grade out relatively well without a lot of crazy you know, steeper slopes or major retaining. So that was good. Yeah. What else can I tell you?
So this is one building that would then have these units within it, right?
Right. Yeah. The footprint would be, well, the footprint would be bigger because it's, so if you can imagine, so there's parking, you can kind of see the back ends of the cars parked underneath there. This is a three-dimensional model. I just didn't print out anything to show the massing, but yeah, you would be parking underneath it, and then there'd be a floor all above it, so.
Almost like the apartments behind the Capitol, the Pavilion building.
Actually, similar as far as sectional relationship, right? You park in and floor above it. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. But it would just be, is that one or two floors? I think it's parking and then two floors, isn't it?
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. This
Maybe
would be parking and then one floor. There'd be one apartment next to the parking, and then there'd be three up on the upper floor. So that would reach out in the back at grade. So.
It's a little hard to evaluate this, so I'm gonna just characterize this as a observation rather than a concern or anything like that. But one question I have is how do we evaluate the construction of multifamily housing in an outlying area like this, when many of our town plan priorities have to do with, this is a compact site design, but it's not within a compact settlement pattern. It's kind of on its own lot, which
Yeah.
looks quite
Right.
lovely.
Right.
So reconciling those things, and when we come to review it, does it meet the criteria that we have to look at? So I can't give you a flash review of that right now, I'm
Yeah.
sorry to say, but that's a big question I would have.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, so, I mean, as you are fleshing out more of the plan and the plan for the building, it may be worth coming down and going through the section 3304, the character of the neighborhood, because part of that is also architectural compatibility, which might be part of what,
It's not at all what I'm
not what you're
concerned
talking about?
No.
Okay,
It's the location of the use.
okay,
Should
okay.
multifamily be located in these types of locations? And I should be very clear that that's not a concern about, that's a concern about efficient use of land, not about proximity of multifamily housing to single-family housing. I'm fine mixing that up.
But I also believe that's part of the discussion that's going on with the zoning regulation, but we're also wanting to encourage cottage clusters, which this would be ideal for.
In all locations?
Not all locations, of course.
And so I'm questioning what
But
locations
there's
are
certainly-
suitable for
certainly-
cottage clusters and whether.
Certainly in open areas, there's a place for it.
That's part of my question, is whether on undeveloped land is where just how far out we want them.
Which is why there's such a lively debate.
So it's happening right now, so your timing is perhaps challenging, I don't know.
Yeah, it is gonna be.
I mean, but it is in a residential 9,000 neighborhood, so it makes sense to me to say, we have a 1.1 acre parcel, but this is not an area appropriate for clustering, so essentially, you can have multifamily, and then it would incentivize either subdivision to create smaller lots out there if you have a 9,000 square foot lot size, or 9,000 square foot per unit. It seems like if you're gonna have a square footage per unit set out in the zoning regulations, and that's why I was curious where this, this more than an acre lot has been there for 40 years. Presumably, that's an indication that at least, depending on how much, certainly if you take the whole acre into consideration, that's an indication that this is an appropriate place for units of housing development. Maybe you detract all the unbuildable space and you get down to 3, but still seems to me like under the regulations, there's an indication that 3 units is appropriate in this location, provided again that you actually go through the conditional use standards to show that the particular proposal will not have an adverse impact on the surrounding area. But I think from the start to say, maybe we don't want 3 units of clustered residential development in a 9,000 per unit area on more than an acre. That was a long way to say a pretty short thing, but I like to hear myself talk sometimes. I've been quiet tonight.
Yes.
Not very
It's your
quiet.
turn.
Not anymore.
Okay.
One board member's thoughts, for what they're worth. Probably not much.
It's good, it's helpful. Any comment is helpful at this point.
Well, and I guess I'll just tack on to that, because it is an ongoing discussion that I think it's unresolved what exactly our powers are in character of the neighborhood. And that ultimately, we're a zoning board and we have to adhere to certain standards. But if there aren't standards, that puts us in a difficult position, where we're asked to substitute sort of judgment about what should or shouldn't be built, sort of to implement what our version of the plan might be, larger sort of city plan of development. At the end of the day, we're tasked with really applying specific standards in the bylaws, and so I think, that's just something we haven't had to fully flesh out, so that's one of the unknowns. It certainly, does augur for, some type of conversation with the planning commission to see, where some of their changes are going. Because I think this is a different project if the steep slope density calculations change.
Yep.
Even beyond simply what you're proposing here, if you were able to count more of that 1.17 acres, you might have different thoughts about how to use this property.
Yes. Yeah, because it's 3, I'm actually financially, I'm not sure I'm gonna be able to make it work.
Right.
It's like, once I get to 4, I can
Yeah.
make it financially, but,
Well, and, I think part of it too, and this is more on the economic side, is, what is the demand for a 1-bedroom unit at this point from the downtown? Is there a demand for that?
That's an issue.
And, that's not anything we decide.
I think that's an issue from the standpoint of marketability.
Yeah.
A lot of folks who are in 1-bedrooms are gonna wanna be closer to downtown.
I mean, there is like trails through Murray Hill, and you can get down to the
Oh,
cemetery.
Oh, yeah,
and stuff.
yeah.
sure
There's
there
kind of
is,
a nice-
right.
You have to be pretty hard.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You
it's
have
not
to be
walkable.
hardy, that's
It's
for
not
sure.
walkable to town.
Not that kind of walkable. But
Yeah.
if you didn't have a car and you needed to get
Hikeable,
downtown.
hikeable to town.
Yeah. Yeah,
Hikeable
exactly.
to town, there you
Yeah.
go, the
Yeah.
hikeability metric.
It's probably a 20-minute walk.
I will
Um,
say, if the regulations require us to exclude all that area, and it stays as it is, and it says 3 units, then we have almost no power to say.
Right,
You
right,
can say,
I
like,
know.
I can't do it without 4, and we could say, well, okay, you can't do it without, you know.
Right,
like-
yeah, no, I understand that. I mean, I say that just in honesty and
Yeah,
putting it all
no,
out
no,
there,
yeah, absolutely,
but,
and so that's
but
where
I
I
understand
think
Yeah,
the
I-
planning
times.
commission
Yeah.
and you're lucky that it's a time when
Yeah,
they're actively looking at that, because
Right.
otherwise, you know, there's much more difficult to change the regulations to accommodate something. So.
yeah, no, it is uncanny timing.
Yeah,
So it's good.
well,
Um,
maybe. You said you wanted to get into this, so it's,
Yeah, yeah, no, I know, yeah.
you're
Good
diving into
discussion.
the deep end. So I don't know, is there anything else that we could help you with?
I just had
Oh,
one
Robert.
question. So when it comes to the restriction, how the slopes restrict the density, if one were to go the, say, infill housing and apply for the bonus of affordability, or, you know, that's 3401, you know, if the unit's affordable, you can get up to 50% reduction. If
That's
it's
interesting.
so much open space per unit. I'm just,
Oh, so you're talking about in the PUD
in the PUD
rules.
section, yeah.
Yeah.
PUD.
But that's not a PUD.
That-
You know,
Yeah,
No, I
this
I
is-
know that's not what's being proposed, I'm just sort of pointing
if-
to it, it almost seems like it's along the lines of what we're talking about with infill housing and.
well, I think it is a little bit only, I mean, obviously it's, I think you start off with the lower density. You know, you subtract out the 30%, and then you get some of these bonuses if you meet the PUD development standards. But I think you have to start, at least, because that's the calculation about density is really a primary calculation in the beginning.
But with the PUD, I mean, you're saying that you could potentially, I mean, if I subtract it out, like I only do 3 units, if I can get a 50% increase for affordability, or I'm not sure what those
Well,
regulations are, but.
it's under 34, it's chapter 340, and it's, you know, it talks about infill housing development, and it
Would
applies.
this be considered infill?
Well, that's, I mean, you look at the
We may
So-
differ in our opinions of that.
this is what it
Liberal
says,
interpretation.
applicability. Infill housing developments are permitted in the riverfront mixed-use, residential 1,500, residential 3,000, residential 6,000, and residential 9,000 districts on parcels not more than 2 acres in size. I mean, that's what the standards are. And
So
s-
If interpreted with respect to the purpose, the first item on the purpose is to encourage an increase in the amount of housing generally and affordable housing in particular located in downtown and surrounding neighborhoods, so
Yeah, this
that
does
gives a
abut,
little bit
like,
of locational
cul-de-sac. I mean, this isn't, it's not devoid from residential neighborhood. It's
I mean,
it
But is
abuts.
it a neighborhood that's surrounding downtown, I
It
think could be
abuts.
debated.
Well, I think it was downtown.
I mean, the
before.
purposes don't set the standards.
Right, yeah.
But they guide the interpretation of the standards, right?
They may, but the standards are infill housing developments are permitted, and then it lists the districts that's permitted in. So, I mean, the purpose may be why they allow it in these districts, and but that's not, you know, I don't think that necessarily tells us that we can make choices within those, as we as a board, because otherwise, I think we get into that debate you started to have with Ryan, which is,
Wasn't
what
a
is
debate.
sorry.
It was an exploration.
Initial skirmish.
Yeah, no, come on.
Of whether or not, you know, this is one of the surrounding neighborhoods.
I-
Aren't
mean-
all the neighborhoods surrounding downtown? I mean,
Rural
reality?
isn't.
Well, even that.
Even, there are some rural.
Actually, I mean,
Is there rural
that's where I
that
come
that
in. I mean, I'm
abuts
like, Montpelier is a
quote-unquote
growth
downtown
district in and of
that you
itself,
see?
like,
Well,
all
sure,
its
the,
surrounding towns can be
Sure,
rural.
right off
It should be a
Northfield
density
Street.
pie anyway.
That's what it's turning into.
Yeah.
Look at,
I guess the only reason I brought up the PD, I think
No, I appreciate
we can, I like what Kate said about the, the character of the neighborhood description.
If you look at this
But with the PUD, we have a list of things where it's like, the applicant is giving something in return for, getting something. And I don't know, that just seems like that's maybe a more palatable approach if this were to go forward.
yeah.
And this does seem like the fact that you're keeping it very small in scope, having 4, modest units in a single building, and keeping what's currently undeveloped, most of it still undeveloped. I mean, it has a lot of similarities with it, what you think about as a PUD. So something to look
right,
into.
just on a small scale.
Right. Yeah,
I
but
mean, have Don look at this if
Okay.
you're working with him. I mean, part of this is that's something that's existing now. If you're, it sounds like you're not on like an immediate timeline. You may want to find out and sound out the planning commission to see, are there changes coming down the pike?
I mean, I think I may have to go a
Yeah.
2-track.
Yeah, you may have to.
Just, yeah, I've got like 70 days left, so.
So I guess what we're leaving you with is it's advisable to take a close look at the bylaws so you can understand how we'd be constrained as we were looking at this project.
Yeah.
And I think keeping in mind what Kate said is that it looks like you're in a district that really hasn't contemplated the development of this particular lot, just by how they've described, how they permit additional infill development. And given that, I think it's a legitimate question for the planning commission, right? So, the way I would suggest that you phase it is by taking some time with the bylaws so that when you go to the planning commission, you can kind of have a list of questions for them.
And it is in the Murray Hill neighborhood. So, and we haven't even gotten to the point where the Murray Hill neighbors chime in as to their feelings.
Yeah,
on this.
there's one house, actually, you can kind of, no, you can't see it. It's up the hill.
It's nice, it'll be pretty screened, no matter
It is
what.
very,
Yeah.
yeah, even.
So even though
Yeah.
they're a butter, they may not feel as,
Yeah,
They may not have the motivation to do so.
well, because
Yeah,
it'll be
she's
down the
such a-
hill and in the woods,
Yeah,
so.
yeah. I really think in general, I think, other than the curb cut, most of the year, even during the winter, I don't think you'd ever know this.
So that would be the question there too, is if it's near that curve, how close it is, how safe the curb cut will be ultimately.
Yeah.
But that'll be.
The curb cut it's pretty straight through there.
Yep,
So,
okay, so it's
and-
okay, it's before the
Yeah,
curb.
and the drives, there's good separation between the driveways and the other side of the street, so
That's great.
I did look at that. So,
Good.
yeah, interesting.
Nice.
Well, good luck.
Thanks for being
Thank you.
open to reflections and observations, and thanks for being interested in providing housing.
Yeah, no, I'd love to do it. Yeah, it's a fun process, so I enjoy it. Does anybody know, can you pay a parking ticket somewhere now?
Right at the, yes.
Police station.
You can just go to the police station, they're open,
You can't, okay.
Yeah.
I believe so.
They're always
really?
open.
Actually, I think there's a sign that says
Okay.
pay them at City Hall.
yeah, I think you have
Oh,
to pay a
okay,
bit.
never mind.
There's a
There's a little,
Dropbox out there.
there's a Dropbox.
Can you do it in the Dropbox?
You can.
Okay.
I'm
Okay.
pretty sure.
I've got a
I
couple.
did.
Do you want to pay a couple
Oh,
more? I can grab from my car.
Yeah.
You're doing it.
Hey, I got a few tickets you can drop off for you.
There was,
Oh, yeah, that's true.
there was a certain Vermont Supreme Court justice who used to plaster his walls with Montpelier parking tickets until he was up for retention, and then suddenly they all got paid.
Decide to pay them off. Couple $100 for this.
Um,
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. That's the only other business apart from announcing that our next regularly scheduled meeting is Monday, April 1st, 2019, 7 p.m. Same forum, same members, hopefully.
I'll make a move to adjourn.
Motion by Kevin to adjourn. Do I have a second? Second by Ryan. All those in favor, please raise your right hand. We are adjourned. Thank you very much.
Okey dokey.
I would
Did you see
agree.
that decision that came out of